The father kicked his rebellious daughter out of the house to teach her a lesson. Years later, he was perplexed by what his daughter was capable of doing. The slam of the door echoed through the house as Dario, a middle-aged man with piercing gray eyes, stormed into Manuela's room. His heavy footsteps reverberated on the wooden floor, mirroring the storm of emotions consuming him. Manuela, a 16-year-old girl with wavy brown hair and apprehensive green eyes, sat rigidly on her bed, clutching her report card with trembling hands. The air crackled with tension as Dario snatched the paper from her, his eyes furiously scanning the grades until they landed on the C in mathematics. His face flushed with anger, veins bulging in his neck as he roared, "A C! Do you have any idea how much this will affect your chances of getting into a good university? I didn't raise a mediocre daughter." Manuela, fighting back tears, attempted to explain, "Dad, please, I tried so hard." The new teacher, Dario cut her off abruptly, jabbing his finger accusingly at her. "I don't want to hear excuses. You've wasted your potential, and I won't tolerate it under my roof." He ripped Manuela's clothes from the closet and threw them into an open suitcase on the floor. Manuela jumped up, trying to stop him, her words coming out in choked sobs. "Please, Dad, don't do this. I promise I'll try harder. I can improve." But Dario was beyond reason. His frantic movements reflected years of unmet expectations and frustrated dreams projected onto his only daughter. Slamming the suitcase shut, he muttered in a cold, sharp voice, "You had your chance. Now you'll learn that in the real world, failure has consequences." With a rough jerk, Dario grabbed Manuela's arm and dragged her downstairs. She stumbled, trying to keep up with his long strides, her mind a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. At the front door, he tossed her suitcase onto the sidewalk, which was slick with a light rain that had begun to fall. Her heart pounding, Manuela made one last desperate plea. "Dad, please don't do this. I have nowhere to go," she begged, tears streaming down her face, mingling with the rain. Dario, his eyes as hard as stones, replied, "Maybe this will teach you the value of hard work and excellence. Don't come back until you are worthy of this family's name." The door slammed shut with a deafening boom, leaving Manuela standing alone in the dark, cold street. The rain mixed with her tears as the reality of her situation sunk in. The world around her seemed to spin, the lights from the neighboring houses blurred in her tear-filled vision. With trembling legs, she picked up her suitcase and began to walk aimlessly down the street, her thoughts a chaotic mix of fear, anger, and sadness. How could he do this to me? I'm his daughter, not an investment gone wrong, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the sound of the rain. As Manuela walked away from the only home she had ever known, the weight of her situation began to press down on her. She had no money, nowhere to stay, and the dark sky threatened a stronger storm. Her faltering steps led her to a nearby park, where she finally collapsed onto a wet bench, clutching her suitcase like a shield against the cruel world she had just encountered. Tears flowed freely now, mingling with the rain soaking her clothes. Between sobs, Manuela spoke to the empty night. "What am I going to do now? How will I survive on my own?" The distant rumble of thunder was her only answer, echoing the uncertainty of her future and the abrupt end of her childhood. 7 years after that fateful night, the shrill ringing of the telephone pierced the silence of Manuela's small apartment. Now 23 years old, her green eyes were hardened by experience, yet still shone with compassion. She hesitated before answering, her thoughts drifting back to Eleanor, the kind stranger who had found her shivering in the rain that night and offered her a home. Eleanor, who had become her mentor and maternal figure, had passed away only 3 months ago, leaving a painful void in Manuela's heart. Taking a deep breath and pushing the grief aside, she answered the phone. Her Aunt Martina's tired and worried voice filled her ear. "Manuela, dear, it's about your father. He's in the hospital, very sick. The doctors don't think he'll last much longer," she said. Manuela felt the world spinning. Her emotions swung between shock, anger, and an unexpected twinge of concern. She took a deep breath, trying to find her voice. "I don't know what to say, Martina. After everything that happened, I truly hope he recovers. Despite everything he did to me, I don't wish him ill. Eleanor, the woman who took me in, taught me that forgiveness is the most genuine form of love. But it doesn't mean that I have to stay in a hurtful situation. My father hurt me deeply. I don't know what to do. She asked her aunt for the name of the hospital, even though she wasn't sure she wanted to see him. After hanging up the phone, Manuela's mind was a whirlwind of memories and conflicting emotions. She walked over to the window of her little apartment and looked out at the city that had become her haven over the past 7 years. The lights of the buildings twinkled like distant stars, reminding her of all the nights she spent alone, fighting to survive and redefine herself after her father's brutal rejection. She caught her own reflection in the glass, seeing not only the strong woman she had become, but also the frightened girl who had been left in the rain so many years ago. With a heavy sigh, she whispered, "All these years and he never tried to find me. Why now? Why when he's dying?" Determined to face her past, she started packing a small bag. Her movements were mechanical and hesitant. Each piece of clothing she placed inside seemed to weigh a ton, laden with the memories of her life before and after that fateful night. She paused, holding an old photograph she'd kept hidden all these years. It was a picture of her and Dario in happier times. Her fingers traced the outline of her father's face. A mix of anger and longing tightened her chest. Speaking softly to the photograph, her voice choked with emotion, she said, "You took everything from me, Dad, my home, my family, my security, but I won't let you take away my humanity." As she drove toward the hospital, Manuela felt the weight of 7 years of absence pressing down on her. The familiar streets of her hometown passed in a blur, each corner evoking memories she'd fought so hard to suppress. The hospital parking lot felt like an emotional minefield, each step towards the main entrance testing her resolve. When she reached the reception desk, she hesitated, her hand hovering over the counter. The receptionist looked up expectantly, and Manuela finally found her voice. "I'm here to see Dario Ibarra. I'm his daughter." The words felt strange on her tongue, as if they belonged to another person, to a life that was no longer hers. The hallway leading to Dario's room seemed to stretch on endlessly. Manuela could feel her heart pounding against her ribs, each step echoing in her ears like a distant drum. When she finally reached the door, she stopped. Her hand trembled as she touched the cold handle. For a moment, she considered turning around, fleeing from this confrontation that could reopen old wounds. But something inside her, perhaps that same resilience that had kept her going all those years, urged her forward. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door. The beeping of machines filled the air. Her eyes fell on the frail figure in the bed, almost unrecognizable as the strong, intimidating man who had kicked her out of his house. With a shaky but determined voice, she finally broke the silence. "Hello, Dad. I came. I know we have a lot to talk about, and I'm here to listen and understand. I truly hope you recover, despite what you put me through." She spoke, even though he couldn't hear her. She stood by his bedside, looking at his pale, wrinkled face, the silence broken only by the steady beeping of the machines. She had barely processed her own words when the door opened to reveal a middle-aged doctor with a grave expression. Introducing himself as Dr. Cabrera, he gave Manuela a brief nod before examining Dario's monitors and medical chart. Manuela watched his every move, her heart pounding with every frown of his brow. Finally, Dr. Cabrera turned to her, his voice low and serious. "Miss Ibarra, I need to discuss your father's condition with you. He has been diagnosed with a rare and extremely aggressive kidney disease," he said, and Manuela felt the air escape from her lungs. Rare, aggressive, the doctor's words echoed in her mind. "I don't understand," she said. Dr. Cabrera continued, his eyes filled with compassion. "The disease has progressed rapidly, and your father's kidneys are failing. He urgently needs a transplant." Manuela felt her legs weaken, and she leaned against the edge of the bed for support. The doctor went on to explain the gravity of the situation. "Time is of the essence here. Without a transplant soon, your father's chances of survival are limited." Manuela looked at Dario, so frail and vulnerable in the hospital bed, so different from the authoritarian man who had cast her out. Turning to the doctor, her voice trembling but determined, she asked, "What needs to be done?" "I'll do anything to help." Dr. Cabrera nodded, a faint smile of approval on his lips. "Your commitment is admirable, Miss Ibarra. The first step is to run compatibility tests. The closer the genetic relationship, the better the chances of finding a suitable donor. The following hours were a blur of needles, test tubes, and endless forms. Manuela barely registered the prick of the needles as she gave sample after sample of blood. Her mind was focused on only one thing, the possibility of saving her father's life. While she waited for the results, she went back to Dario's room and sat beside his bed. Looking at his sleeping face, she allowed herself, for the first time in years, to cry for all that had happened. Silent tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, "Why did everything change, Dad? How did we let it get to this point?" The silence of the room, accompanied by the steady beeping of the machines, was her only answer. Dr. Cabrera's return broke into Manuela's thoughts. She quickly stood, anxious for news. He held a folder in his hands, his expression unreadable. "Miss Ibarra, we've analyzed the results of the compatibility tests," he began, his voice carefully neutral. Manuela held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "You are a perfect match for your father. In fact, it's the best compatibility I've seen in my years of practice." Manuela felt a surge of relief and fear at the same time. She glanced at Dario, still unconscious, and then turned her attention back to the doctor. "What exactly does that mean, doctor? What happens now?" Dr. Cabrera explained the risks and procedure of the transplant, his voice kind but firm. "The decision is yours, Miss Ibarra. You must understand that without this transplant, his chances are practically zero. However, there are risks for both of you, as with any surgical procedure." For a long moment, Manuela remained silent, her gaze shifting between her father's pale face and Dr. Cabrera's concerned expression. She thought of Eleanor, of her lessons on forgiveness and compassion. She thought about the night she was thrown out of her home, the pain and loneliness she faced, and then she thought about the opportunity for redemption that lay before her. With a deep sigh, Manuela straightened her shoulders and looked directly into the doctor's eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was firm. "I will do the donation, doctor, not for what he did in the past, but because I would do this for anyone in need. When can we begin?" Dr. Cabrera nodded, a smile of admiration on his face. "Your bravery is inspiring, Miss Ibarra. We will begin preparations immediately. If everything goes well, we'll perform the surgery tomorrow morning." As the doctor left to make arrangements, Manuela turned her attention back to Dario. Holding his cold hand, she whispered, "I'm giving you a second chance, Dad. I hope you can use this opportunity to rethink the way you treat those who love you." News of Manuela's decision traveled fast, reaching her Aunt Martina, who was anxiously waiting in the hospital waiting room. When Manuela entered, Martina abruptly stood up, her face a mixture of conflicting emotions. "Manuela, dear, is it true? Are you really going to donate a kidney to Dario?" Her voice trembled, revealing her disbelief and worry. Manuela nodded calmly, bracing herself for her aunt's reaction. Martina stepped forward, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Oh, Manuela, you don't have to do this. After everything he put you through." Manuela took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "Aunt, I know it's hard to understand, but this is my decision. I'm not doing it for the past. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do." Shaking her head, visibly disturbed, Martina began to pace the small waiting room, her hands twisting nervously. "This is crazy, Manuela. Dario threw you out on the street like garbage, and now you're going to risk your life for him," she argued, her voice rising, laden with years of resentment towards her brother's actions. Manuela stood her ground. Her voice was calm but resolute. "I understand your concern, Aunt, but this is my decision. I'm not asking for your approval, just your respect for my choice." She paused, looking directly into Martina's eyes. "Dario may have made mistakes, but I would do this for anyone." Her words seemed to echo in the room, eliciting a visceral reaction from Martina. Turning abruptly, she looked at her niece with a mix of admiration and frustration. "Manuela, you don't owe him anything. I wish I could have done more for you back then, but living in another city, I found out about it too late. He abandoned you when you needed him most. How can you just forgive and forget?" she asked, her voice unwavering in its opinion. Manuela felt a pang of pain as she remembered that rainy night, but she held her composure. Approaching Martina, her voice was firm and clear. "I haven't forgotten, Aunt, but I also haven't let the past define me. Eleanor showed me that forgiveness is not weakness, it's strength. It's choosing to be better than the things that hurt us. She paused, letting her words sink in. I'm doing this not only for Dario, but also for myself, to show that I can be the person I choose to be, not the one that circumstances tried to force me into. The tension between them was palpable, emotions running high as Martina tried to understand. She gestured for Manuela to sit down. As they settled into the uncomfortable waiting room chairs, Martina broke the silence, her voice softer now, but still heavy with worry. What if something goes wrong, dear? What if you regret it? Have you thought about the consequences? Manuela felt the weight of her aunt's questions, but she found strength in the memory of Eleanor. With a soft smile, she replied, Aunt, life is full of uncertainties, but I know I'd regret it more if I didn't try. Eleanor taught me that our choices define us, and I choose compassion. She took Martina's hand, squeezing it gently. I know it's hard to understand, but I'm asking you to respect my decision. I'm not asking for your agreement, just your support. The following hours were an emotional roller coaster for both women, Martina fluctuating between admiration for Manuela's courage and periods of deep concern. In a moment of calm, she approached Manuela again, her voice low and hesitant. Manuela, I still don't fully understand, but I admire your strength. I just want to make sure you're doing this for you, not out of some misguided sense of obligation. Manuela took Martina's hand, squeezing it gently. Aunt, I appreciate your concern. Everything is going to be all right. It has to be. She paused, a sad smile playing on her lips. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I'm at peace with my choice, and I hope it will all work out. And that, in itself, is already worth it. As the night deepened, weariness washed over them. Manuela felt a mix of exhaustion and determination. Tomorrow would be a new day, a day that could change everything. Closing her eyes, ready to face whatever may come, she was grateful for her aunt's comforting presence by her side. Night fell over the hospital, casting long shadows across the silent corridors. Exhausted after hours of preparation and preoperative exams, Manuela returned to Dario's room for one last visit before the surgery scheduled for the following morning. The room was shrouded in soft darkness, broken only by the faint glow of the monitors. She approached the bed, her hesitant steps echoing in the stillness. She looked at her father's pale face, etched with years of harshness and now with illness. Suddenly, Dario's eyes fluttered open, slowly focusing on the figure beside his bed. His hoarse, weak voice broke the silence. Who's there? Manuela felt her heart race, a mix of emotions flooding her. It's me, Dad. Manuela, she replied softly, leaning closer so he could see her better. Dario blinked several times, his confused gaze traveling over Manuela's face. There was a glimmer of recognition in his eyes, but also a haze of uncertainty. Manuela! But how? Why are you here? His voice trembled, filled with emotion and confusion. Manuela took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. I'm here to help, Dad. You're sick, but everything is going to be all right. She hesitated before continuing. We're going to do surgery tomorrow morning that will make you better. Dario frowned, struggling to understand. Surgery? What kind of surgery? Manuela felt a lump forming in her throat. How could she possibly explain the magnitude of what was about to happen? At that moment, Dr. Cabrera entered the room, surprised to see Dario awake. He quickly approached the bed, checking his vital signs and lucidity. Mr. Ibarra, it's good to see you awake. How are you feeling? Dario, still confused, looked from the doctor to Manuela. I don't know. What's going on, doctor? Dr. Cabrera glanced at Manuela before replying. Mr. Ibarra, you have a serious kidney disease. Your daughter, Manuela, has offered to donate a kidney. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning. The doctor's words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with meaning. Dario's reaction was immediate and intense. His eyes widened in a mix of surprise and horror, his wrinkled face etched with shock. No, absolutely not. He tried to sit up, his movements weak but determined. I won't allow this. Manuela, you can't do this. It's too dangerous. But Manuela stepped closer, attempting to soothe him. Dad, please calm down. I want to do this. I've already made my decision. Manuela argued. Dad, please, this isn't just about you. But Dario wouldn't listen. He turned to Dr. Cabrera, his voice gaining strength with urgency. Doctor, cancel the surgery. I refuse to put my daughter's life at risk. I'd rather die than let her go through this. The room descended into controlled chaos. Dr. Cabrera tried to explain the risks and benefits of the procedure, while Manuela struggled to make her father understand her choice. Dario, however, remained adamant. You don't understand, Manuela. I don't deserve this. Not after what I did to you, he said, his voice breaking, years of regret overflowing in his words. I threw you out, abandoned you when you needed me most. How can you be willing to risk your life for me now? Hot tears streamed down Manuela's face, but her voice remained firm. Dad, this is not about deserving. It's about forgiveness, about second chances. Eleanor, the woman who raised me, taught me that sometimes the bravest act is to offer compassion when it would be easier to hold on to resentment. She took Dario's trembling hand and squeezed it gently. Please, let me do this. Not for you, but for us, so we have a chance to heal more than just your body. The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Their future hung by a thread, waiting for Dario's final decision. Manuela's words were met with silence, broken only by Dario's firm, resolute voice. No, Manuela, my decision is final. He turned to Dr. Cabrera, his pale face a stark contrast to the intensity in his eyes. Doctor, I refuse to accept this procedure. I will not allow my daughter to risk her life for me. Manuela felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her. Dad, please reconsider. This is not just about you. But Dario was unwavering. His face was a mask of determination. I told you to leave. I will not be responsible for putting your life in danger. I made that mistake once. I won't do it again. Clearly uncomfortable with the situation, Doctor. Cabrera tried to intervene. Mr. Ibarra, perhaps we should all calm down and discuss this rationally. But his words were cut off by a cry of pain from Dario. Suddenly, the heart monitor began to beep erratically. Dario clutched his chest, his face contorted in agony. Dad! Manuela screamed, rushing to his side. Dr. Cabrera immediately sprang into action, calling for the emergency team over the intercom. Nurses and doctors flooded the room, working frantically to stabilize Dario. Manuela was pushed to a corner, watching helplessly as they fought to save her father's life. She could hear snippets of their urgent conversations. Blood pressure dropping, kidney function collapsing. We need to act now. In the midst of the chaos, a resolve grew within her. She approached Dr. Cabrera, who was overseeing the emergency treatment. Doctor, she said, her voice trembling but resolute, please perform the surgery now. I know he refused, but he'll die if we don't do something. Dr. Cabrera looked at her, doubt evident in his eyes. Manuela, you understand that this would be against the patient's expressed wishes? There are protocols, ethical concerns. Manuela cut him off, her voice gaining strength. I understand, doctor, but I also understand that my father is dying. He is in no condition to make this decision right now. Please, I beg you, save his life. I'll take full responsibility. For a moment, Dr. Cabrera remained silent, the weight of the decision clearly visible on his face. He glanced at Dario, now unconscious and fighting for his life, then back at Manuela, whose eyes were filled with determination and love. Finally, he slowly nodded. All right, Manuela, we'll do it. But you must understand the risks and possible legal consequences, he explained, and Manuela quickly nodded, a mix of relief and fear washing over her. I understand, doctor. Thank you. As the medical team prepared for the emergency surgery, Manuela approached her father's bedside. Leaning in, she whispered in his ear, Hang on, Dad. I'm not going to give up on you, no matter how much you try to push me away. We'll get through this together. With those words, she was taken away to prepare for surgery, the future uncertain, but her determination unwavering. Minutes later, the hospital's surgical center was a hive of activity as Manuela was prepped for surgery. Nurses moved quickly around her, checking her vital signs and adjusting equipment. The strong smell of antiseptic filled the air, mingling with the palpable tension that permeated the room. Manuela took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves as she was transferred to the operating table. Her eyes scanned the surroundings, taking in every detail. The bright lights overhead, the monitors silently blinking, the medical team preparing with methodical precision. Dr. Cabrera approached her, his kind eyes meeting hers above his surgical mask. "Are you ready, Manuela?" he asked softly. Manuela nodded, her voice firm despite the fear threatening to consume her. "I'm ready, doctor. Let's do it." As the anesthesiologist approached with the mask, Manuela closed her eyes, allowing herself one last moment of reflection. Images of her life flashed through her mind. The night she was kicked out of the house, the years of struggle and overcoming, Eleanor's kind face. She thought of her father, lying in the room next door, fighting for his life. A fierce determination grew within her, overcoming her fear. "This is bigger than both of us, Dad. This is about forgiveness, about second chances," she thought. The anesthesiologist's gentle voice interrupted her thoughts. "Count down from 10, Manuela," he instructed, and she began to count, her voice steady. 10, 9, 8. As the numbers decreased, Manuela felt her consciousness fading, the world around her disappearing in a haze of drowsiness. "The procedure began, Doctor," Cabrera leading the team with calm efficiency. Every movement was calculated and precise. The silence in the room was broken only by the steady beeping of the monitors and the occasional whispered instruction. As the surgery progressed, the tension in the room was palpable. Everyone was aware of the risks, the critical importance of this procedure for both Dario and Manuela. The kidney was carefully removed, every blood vessel and tissue handled with the utmost care. When the organ was finally extracted, a collective sigh of relief swept through the room. Dr. Cabrera looked at the kidney in his hands, a tangible symbol of Manuela's extraordinary sacrifice, an act of such pure love and altruism. As the team prepared to transport the kidney to Dario, Manuela remained unconscious, her body still and vulnerable on the surgical table. Nurses worked diligently to close the incision, their movements precise and careful. Soon the kidney was taken away, carrying the hope of life for Dario. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the first thing Manuela heard as she woke up from the anesthesia. Her eyes slowly opened, adjusting to the soft light of the recovery room. She blinked several times, trying to focus her blurry vision. A nurse noticed her stirring and quickly approached, checking her vital signs. "Welcome back, Manuela. How are you feeling?" she asked with a friendly smile. Manuela tried to speak, but her throat was dry. The nurse offered her some ice chips, which she gratefully accepted. After a few moments, she finally managed to whisper, "I'm alive. That's a start, right?" The nurse chuckled softly, admiring the young woman's spirit. In the following hours, Manuela surprised the medical team with her quick recovery. Determined to get up and move, she ignored the pain in her abdomen and insisted on trying to sit up in bed, only hours after surgery. Dr. Cabrera, making his rounds, entered the room just as she was attempting this feat. Whoa, slow down there, superwoman," he said, rushing to her side. Manuela winced in pain, but her eyes were filled with determination. "Doctor, the sooner I get up, the faster I'll recover, right?" she asked. He couldn't help but smile at her tenacity. "Your willpower is admirable, Manuela, but we need to balance it with your body's need to heal. Let's make a deal. You rest today and tomorrow we'll start some light exercises." Reluctantly, Manuela agreed, but her mind was far from idle. She bombarded the nurses and doctors with questions about her recovery and her father's, absorbing every detail about the healing process in postoperative care. However, no one was willing to discuss Dario's progress for fear of worrying her. Her Aunt Martina, who had come to visit, was stunned by Manuela's positive attitude. "Dear, you've just had major surgery. How can you be so cheerful?" Manuela smiled, though her eyes revealed a mixture of complex emotions. "Aunt Martina, every moment I spend here is a reminder of why I did this. I can't afford to stay still. There's too much at stake, but no one wants to tell me how my dad is doing." Her gaze held an unspoken question. Martina squeezed her hand, her eyes filling with tears. "Worry about yourself now. You were amazing, you know. So strong, so brave." Days later, true to her word, Manuela was on her feet, taking her first steps down the hospital corridor, supported by a nurse. Each step was a challenge, but she refused to give up. Other patients and visitors watched her with admiration as she slowly progressed. Her face was a mask of concentration and determination. An elderly man in a wheelchair clapped softly as she passed. "That's it, young lady. Show them what you're made of." Manuela smiled gratefully, feeling a surge of strength coursing through her. She turned to the nurse, her eyes shining with determination. "I think I can go a little further. How about we visit my dad?" The nurse shook her head, reminding her that she needed to take care of herself first. Manuela continued to amaze everyone with her rapid recovery in the days that followed. She rigorously adhered to her medication and exercise regimen, always pushing her limits. During a physiotherapy session, she managed to complete a series of exercises that would normally be introduced only weeks later. "Manuela, in all my years of practice, I've never seen anyone recover so quickly from surgery like this," the impressed physiotherapist commented. Panting but satisfied, she replied, "Well, I have great motivation. Every step I take, every exercise I complete, brings me closer to when I can go back to my life again. And this time, I'll be ready for whatever comes my way." Her expression became more serious. The physiotherapist nodded understandingly, realizing that Manuela's strength came not only from her physical body, but from a deep, unwavering determination within her spirit. However, oblivious to everything that was happening with her own recovery, Manuela had no idea what had happened with her father in the next room. Dr. Cabrera frowned as he examined Dario's latest test results. Something was wrong, very wrong. Just a few days ago, everything seemed to be progressing well after the transplant. Now the numbers in front of him told a different and alarming story. He turned to the head nurse, his voice tense. "Call the team immediately and increase Mr. Ibarra's monitoring. I want readings every hour." The nurse quickly nodded and hurried out of the room. The doctor turned his attention back to Dario, who lay unconscious in the bed, his breathing labored and irregular. "What's happening to you, Dario? Why is your body rejecting a perfectly compatible kidney?" he murmured. The following hours were a whirlwind of frantic activity. Specialists came and went from Dario's room, each offering theories and suggestions, but none could fully explain the sudden deterioration. Monitors beeped incessantly, recording every fluctuation in his precarious vital signs. Dr. Cabrera coordinated the efforts, his mind going over all the possibilities, however improbable. During a brief lull in the discussions, he found himself looking at Dario's pale, motionless face. "You need to get better, Dario. Don't give up now. Your daughter didn't give up on you, not even when you needed it most. Get better and fix your mistakes," he whispered, knowing the complex family history between his patients after overhearing their conversation before surgery. Meanwhile, Manuela, still recovering in her own room, noticed the unusual commotion in the hallway. Nurses and doctors rushed past, their expressions tense and worried. Her heart skipped a beat. A dark premonition formed in her chest. Gathering all her strength, she got out of bed, ignoring the pain in her abdomen, and carefully made her way to the door, determined to find out what was happening. She intercepted a nurse in the hallway. "Please, what's going on? Is it about my father?" The nurse hesitated, clearly reluctant to share information. Manuela grabbed her arm, her eyes pleading. "Please, I need to know." The nurse sighed, giving in to the intensity of her gaze. "Your father, he's not responding well. The doctors are doing everything they can, but—" She trailed off, letting her unspoken words hang in the air. Manuela's world seemed to slow down, the nurse's words echoing in her ears. She leaned against the wall, fighting a wave of dizziness. It couldn't be true, not after everything they had been through, after all she had sacrificed. He couldn't be getting worse. Not now. With a renewed determination, she straightened up. "Take me to him," she demanded, her voice leaving no room for argument. The nurse hesitated again, but something in Manuela's demeanor made her relent. Slowly, they made their way to Dario's room. As they approached, Manuela could hear the muffled sound of agitated voices and the irregular beeping of the monitors. She paused at the door, taking a deep breath to brace herself for what she was about to see. Upon entering the room, Manuela was immediately struck by the gravity of the situation. Dario was surrounded by machines, tubes, and wires snaking across every visible part of his body. His skin had an unhealthy grayish hue, and his breathing was shallow and irregular. Noticing her presence, Dr. Cabrera approached, his face etched with concern. Manuela, you shouldn't be here. You need to rest. Ignoring his words, her eyes fixed on the fragile figure of her father, she asked, What's happening, doctor? Why is he getting worse? The doctor sighed deeply, running his hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. Honestly, Manuela, we don't know. His body seems to be rejecting the kidney, but we can't understand why. We're trying everything, but he trailed off, the implication clear in his tone. Manuela felt tears welling up, but blinked them back. She approached the bed and took Dario's cold hand in hers. Listen, Dad, you don't have permission to give up. I've lost everything. I lost Mom when I was a little girl. I lost you when, well, you know. I lost Eleanor a few months ago. I can't lose anyone else, she whispered fiercely. As the doctors continued their desperate battle to save Dario, Manuela remained by his side, a tireless sentinel, her own willpower a beacon of hope in the darkness threatening to engulf them. Dr. Cabrera nodded, a small smile of approval playing on his lips. Your commitment is admirable, Miss Ibarra. The first step is to run compatibility tests. The closer the relation, the higher the chance of finding a suitable donor. The following hours were a blur of needles, test tubes, and endless forms. Manuela barely noticed the needles as she gave sample after sample, her mind focused on one thing, saving her father's life. While awaiting the results, she returned to Dario's room and sat by his bed. As she gazed upon his sleeping face, she allowed herself, for the first time in years, to cry. Silent tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, Why did everything change, Dad? How did we let it get to this point? Only the steady beeping of the machines and the silence of the room answered her. Dr. Cabrera's return interrupted her thoughts. She quickly stood up, anxious for news. The doctor held a folder in his hand, his face unreadable. Miss Ibarra, we have analyzed the results of the compatibility test, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Manuela held her breath. You are a perfect match for your father. In fact, it's the best match I've seen in my years of practice. Manuela felt a mix of relief and fear. She looked at Dario, still unconscious, and then at the doctor. What does that mean exactly, doctor? What happens now? Dr. Cabrera explained the risks and procedures of the transplant in a kind but firm voice. The decision is yours, Miss Ibarra. Without a transplant, his chances are practically zero. But as with any surgery, there are risks for both of you. Manuela was silent for a long moment, her gaze shifting between her father's pale face and Dr. Cabrera's concerned expression. She thought of Eleanor's lessons about forgiveness and compassion, the night she was kicked out of her house, and the pain and loneliness she'd faced. And then she thought about the opportunity for redemption before her. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her shoulders and looked directly at the doctor. I will do the donation, doctor. Not for what he did in the past, but because I would do this for anyone in need. When can we start? Smiling with admiration, Doctor, Cabrera said, Your bravery is inspiring, Miss Ibarra. We'll begin preparations immediately. If everything goes well, we will perform the surgery tomorrow morning. As the doctor left to make arrangements, Manuela turned to Dario and, holding his cold hand, whispered, I'm giving you a second chance, Dad. I hope you use this opportunity to rethink how you treat the people who love you. The news of Manuela's decision spread quickly. Martina was waiting in the hospital waiting room, her face betraying a mixture of emotions as Manuela entered. Manuela, dear, is it true? Are you really going to donate a kidney to Dario? Her voice trembled with disbelief and concern. Manuela nodded calmly, waiting for her aunt's reaction. Martina stepped closer, her eyes welling with unshed tears. Oh, Manuela, you don't have to do this. After everything he did to you. Manuela took a deep breath and said, Aunt, I know it's hard to understand, but this is my decision. I'm not doing it for the past. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. Martina shook her head, visibly disturbed, and began pacing. This is crazy. Dario threw you out like garbage, and now you're going to risk your life for him? Her voice rose, heavy with years of resentment. Calm but resolute, Manuela said, I understand your concern, Anne, but this is my decision. I'm not asking for your approval, just your respect for my choice. Dario may have made mistakes, but I would do this for anyone. Martina turned abruptly, looking at her niece with a mixture of admiration and frustration. Manuela, you don't owe him anything. I wish I could have done more for you back then, but I lived in another city and didn't know. He abandoned you when you needed him most. How can you forgive and forget? Manuela felt a pang of pain, but held her composure. Her voice was firm and clear. I haven't forgotten, Aunt, but I haven't let the past define me. Eleanor showed me that forgiveness is not weakness. It's strength, choosing to be better than the things that hurt us. I'm doing this not only for Dario, but also for myself, to show that I can be the person I choose to be, not the one that circumstances tried to force on me. The tension between them was palpable as Martina tried to understand. She gestured for Manuela to sit down. What if something goes wrong, dear? What if you regret it? Have you thought about the consequences? Martina asked, her voice softer now, but still heavy with worry. Manuela took her aunt's hand, squeezing it gently. Aunt, life is full of uncertainties, but I'd regret it more if I didn't try. Eleanor taught me that our choices define us, and I choose compassion. I know it's hard to understand, but please respect my decision. I'm not asking you to agree. Just support me. The following hours were an emotional roller coaster, Martina vacillating between admiration for Manuela's courage and deep concern. Manuela, she said, her voice low and hesitant, I still don't fully understand, but I admire your strength. I just want to make sure you're doing this for you, not out of some sense of obligation. Manuela squeezed her aunt's hand. Aunt, I appreciate your concern. Everything is going to be all right. It has to be. She paused, a sad smile on her lips. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm at peace with my choice, and I hope it all works out. And that, in itself, is already worth it. As the night wore on, Manuela felt a mix of exhaustion and determination. Tomorrow would be a new day, a day that could change everything. Closing her eyes, she was ready to face whatever might come, grateful for her aunt's comforting presence. Night had fallen over the hospital, casting long shadows. Exhausted, Manuela returned to Dario's room for one last visit before the surgery. The room was dimly lit, the only light coming from the soft glow of the monitors. As she approached the bed, she saw Dario's face, etched with years of harshness and now illness. Suddenly, his eyes fluttered open and slowly focused on her. Who's there? He croaked. Manuela felt her heart race. It's me, Dad, Manuela, she whispered, leaning closer. Dario blinked several times, his eyes focusing on her face. There was a glimmer of recognition and a haze of uncertainty in them. Manuela? But how? Why are you here? His voice trembled with emotion and confusion. Manuela took a deep breath. I'm here to help, Dad. You're sick, but everything is going to be all right. Tomorrow we're going to do surgery that will make you better. Dario frowned. Surgery? What kind of surgery? Manuela felt a lump in her throat. Dr. Cabrera walked in just then. He was surprised to see Dario awake and quickly checked his vitals and lucidity. Mr. Ibarra, it's good to see you awake. How are you feeling? Confused, Dario looked from the doctor to Manuela. I don't know. What's going on, doctor? Dr. Cabrera glanced at Manuela. Mr. Ibarra, you have a serious kidney disease. Your daughter Manuela has offered to donate a kidney. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning. There was a stunned silence. Then Dario's eyes flew open, his face a mix of surprise and horror. No, absolutely not, he cried, trying to sit up. I won't allow it. Manuela, you can't do this. It's too dangerous. Manuela stepped forward, trying to calm him. Dad, please, calm down. I want to do this. I've already made my decision. But Dario wouldn't listen. He turned to Dr. Cabrera, his voice thick with urgency. Doctor, cancel the surgery. I refuse to put my daughter's life at risk. I'd rather die than let her go through with this. The room became a whirlwind of activity as Dr. Cabrera tried to explain the procedure, and Manuela struggled to make her father understand her choice. You don't understand, Manuela. I don't deserve this. Not after what I did to you, Dario cried, years of regret pouring from him. I threw you out. I abandoned you when you needed me most. How can you be willing to risk your life for me now? Tears rolled down Manuela's face. Dad, she said, her voice steady despite her tears. This isn't about deserving, it's about forgiveness, about second chances. Eleanor, the woman who raised me, taught me that sometimes the bravest act is to offer compassion when it would be easier to hold a grudge. She took his hand, squeezing gently. Please, let me do this. Not for you, but for us, so we can heal more than just your body. They waited for Dario's final decision, the silence thick with emotion. No, Manuela, Dario said, his voice resolute. My decision is final. Turning to Dr. Cabrera, his face pale but his eyes intense, he said, Doctor, I refuse this procedure. I will not allow my daughter to risk her life for me. Manuela felt her world crashing down. Dad, please reconsider. This is not just about you. But Dario was unshakable. I told you to leave. I won't be responsible for putting your life in danger. I made that mistake once. I won't do it again. Dr. Cabrera, clearly uncomfortable, tried to intervene. Mr. Ibarra, perhaps we should calm down and discuss this. Suddenly, Dario cried out in pain, clutching his chest, his face contorted. The heart monitor went crazy. Dad! Manuela screamed. Dr. Cabrera instantly called for the emergency team. The room was filled with doctors and nurses, working feverishly to stabilize Dario. Manuela was ushered to a corner, watching helplessly. Blood pressure dropping, kidney function collapsing. We need to act now. Manuela watched, her resolve hardening. She approached Dr. Cabrera. Doctor, she said, her voice shaking but firm, please perform the surgery now. I know he refused, but he'll die if we don't. Dr. Cabrera looked at her. Manuela, you understand that this is against the patient's wishes? There are protocols, ethical concerns. I understand, she interrupted. But I also understand that my father is dying. He's not in a condition to make this decision now. Please, I beg you, save his life. I'll take full responsibility. The doctor was silent for a moment, the burden of the decision weighing on him. He looked at Dario, unconscious and struggling to survive, and then at Manuela, her eyes filled with love and determination. He nodded slowly. All right, Manuela, we'll do it. But you must understand the risks and the possible legal consequences. I understand, doctor, she said, fear and relief washing over her. Thank you. As the team prepared for emergency surgery, Manuela leaned close to her father and whispered, Hang on, Dad. I'm not giving up on you, no matter how much you try to push me away. We'll get through this together. Then she was taken away to prep for surgery. The future was uncertain, but she was determined. Minutes later, the surgical center buzzed with activity as Manuela was prepped for surgery. The air reeked of antiseptic, and the tension was thick. They moved her to the operating table. Above her were the bright lights and silent blinking monitors. The medical team was getting ready with practiced precision. Are you ready, Manuela? Asked Dr. Cabrera, his kind eyes looking at her over his surgical mask. I'm ready, doctor. Let's do it, she said, her voice firm despite her fear. As the anesthesiologist approached with the mask, she closed her eyes, reflecting. She saw the night she was kicked out, the years of struggle, Eleanor's gentle face. She thought of her father, fighting for his life in the next room. A fierce determination grew within her, stronger than her fear. This is bigger than both of us, Dad. This is about forgiveness, about second chances. Count backwards from 10, Manuela, said the anesthesiologist, his voice gentle. 10, 9, 8. She counted, her voice steady, then faded away as the world around her disappeared into a hazy drowsiness. Dr. Cabrera, calm and efficient, led the surgical team. Every move was calculated and precise. The silence in the room was broken only by the insistent beeping of the monitors and the occasional instruction. The tension was almost unbearable. Everyone knew the stakes were high, not only for Dario, but for Manuela as well. They carefully removed her kidney, treating each blood vessel and tissue with extreme care. A collective sigh of relief echoed through the room when they were finally done. Holding the kidney, Dr. Cabrera murmured, "Extraordinary, an act of such pure love and altruism." Then they took the kidney to Dario as Manuela lay unconscious on the table, nurses working to close the incision. Soon they were rushing the kidney to Dario, carrying with them the hope of life. When Manuela woke from the anesthesia, The first thing she heard was the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Her eyes opened slowly and blinked, trying to focus as she adjusted to the soft light. A nurse came over, smiling kindly. "Welcome back, Manuela. How are you feeling?" Manuela tried to speak, but her throat was parched. The nurse gave her some ice chips, and after a while she managed to whisper, "I'm alive. That's a start, right?" The nurse chuckled, admiring Manuela's spirit. In the hours that followed, Manuela's rapid recovery stunned the medical team. Determined to move, she ignored the pain and insisted on sitting up. She was in the middle of this when Dr. Cabrera came in. Whoa, slow down there, superwoman," he said, hurrying over to help. Manuela winced. "Doctor," she asked, her eyes full of determination, "the sooner I get up, the faster I'll recover, right?" He smiled at her tenacity. "Your willpower is admirable, Manuela, but we have to balance it with your body's need to heal. Let's make a deal. You rest today, and tomorrow, we'll start some light exercise." She reluctantly agreed, her mind racing. She peppered the doctors and nurses with questions about her recovery and her father's, but no one would discuss his progress, trying not to worry her. Martina, who came to visit, was amazed. "You just had major surgery. How can you be so cheerful?" Smiling, but her eyes revealing a mix of emotions, Manuela replied, "And every moment I'm here is a reminder of why I did this. I can't afford to be still. There's too much at stake, but no one wants to tell me how Dad's doing." Martina squeezed her hand, tears welling up. "Worry about yourself. You were amazing, so strong, so brave." Days passed and Manuela was on her feet, walking slowly down the hospital corridor, supported by a nurse. She refused to give up, and other patients and visitors looked at her with admiration as she passed. An elderly man in a wheelchair clapped. "That's it, young lady. Show them what you're made of." Manuela smiled, a surge of strength coursing through her. "I think I can go a little further," she said to the nurse, her eyes shining. "How about we visit my dad?" The doctor shook his head. She needed to take care of herself first. Manuela continued to recover quickly. She was religious about her medication and exercise regimen, but was always pushing her limits. During one session, she completed a series of exercises not normally introduced for weeks. "I've never seen anyone recover so quickly from surgery like this," said the amazed physiotherapist. Panting but satisfied, she replied, "I have great motivation. Every step I take, every exercise brings me closer to the moment I can get back to my life, and this time, I'll be ready for whatever comes." The physiotherapist nodded, seeing the depths of her determination. But unbeknownst to Manuela, things had taken a turn for the worse with her father. Dr. Cabrera frowned, studying Dario's test results. Something was very wrong. Dario had been doing well after the surgery, but now the numbers told a different story. "Call the team right away and increase Mr. Ibarra's monitoring. I want hourly reading," he told the head nurse, his voice tight. As the nurse hurried away, he looked at Dario. "What's happening to you, Dario? Why is your body rejecting a perfectly good kidney?" The hours flew by. Specialists came and went, offering theories and suggestions, but nothing explained the sudden deterioration. Monitors beeped, recording Dario's precarious vital signs. Dr. Cabrera coordinated their efforts, trying to come up with answers. During a lull in the discussion, he looked at Dario. "You need to get better, Dario. Don't give up. Your daughter didn't give up on you, not even when you needed it most. Get better and fix your mistakes," he whispered, knowing the troubled family dynamic after hearing them argue. In her own room, Manuela sensed the commotion in the hallway. Nurses and doctors rushed past, their expressions worried. A dark feeling formed in her chest. She got out of bed and ignored the pain in her abdomen. "Please, what's going on?" she asked a nurse. "Is it about my father?" Hesitant, the nurse said, "Your father's not responding well. The doctors are doing everything they can, but—" She trailed off. Manuela's world seemed to stop. She leaned against the wall, fighting dizziness. It couldn't be true, not after everything. She wouldn't let him get worse, not now. Straightening up, she said, "Take me to him." There was no room for argument in her voice. Something in her posture made the nurse give in. Manuela could hear the muffled voices and the irregular beeping of the monitors as they neared his room. She paused at the door, taking a deep breath to steel herself. The scene hit her like a physical blow. Dario was covered with machines, wires, and tubes snaking from his body. His skin was gray, and his breathing was shallow and erratic. "Manuela, you shouldn't be here. You need to rest, doctor," Cabrera said, concern on his face. Ignoring him, her eyes were glued to her father. "What's happening, doctor? Why is he getting worse?" Running his hand through his hair, the doctor sighed. "Honestly, Manuela, we don't know. His body seems to be rejecting the kidney, and we don't know why. We're trying everything, but—" He let the sentence hang in the air. Manuela blinked back tears and went to the bed, taking Dario's cold hand in hers. "Listen, Dad, you are not allowed to give up. I lost everything. I lost Mom when I was little. I lost you when, well, you know. I lost Eleanor a few months ago. I can't lose anyone else." As the doctors fought to save Dario, Manuela stayed by his side, her will a beacon of hope. There was a flicker of movement, so subtle it would have gone unnoticed if Manuela hadn't been so hyper-aware. "Dad? Dad, can you hear me?" she called softly, leaning closer. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, almost imperceptibly, Dario's fingers tightened around hers. Dr. Cabrera came back in, looking exhausted, but there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. He checked the monitors and made notes. Turning to Manuela with a small smile, he said, "It looks like your dad is a fighter. The new medications seem to be working. He's still critical, but he's responding in a way we haven't seen before." Manuela felt relief, but there was a note of caution born of hard experience. There was a long way to go. Still, for the first time in days, she felt a flicker of genuine hope. "Thank you, doctor. Thank you for not giving up on him. This is a team effort, Manuela. His determination, your selfless donation, our medical team, we all played a part," Dr. Cabrera said gently. The days crawled by, each one bringing small improvements in Dario's condition. Manuela, fully recovered from her surgery, remained vigilant, splitting her time between Dario's room and brief moments of forced rest. On the morning of the 5th day after the crisis, she was sleeping in an uncomfortable armchair when a sudden movement woke her. Blinking the sleep from her eyes, her heart almost stopped when she saw Dario move, his eyes opening slowly. She jumped up, hope and fear mixing within her. "Dad, you're finally awake!" "Manuela," he whispered, his voice raspy from disuse. Her voice trembling, Manuela said, "It's me, Dad. Manuela." "Manuela," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't deserve to be here. I don't deserve for you to be here. But I don't know how much time I have left, so I need to tell you everything." She felt a lump in her throat, unable to speak, watching him struggle. He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering his strength, then continued, his voice growing stronger. "Manuela, my daughter, I failed you in every way possible. That day, the day I kicked you out, I not only failed as a father, but I betrayed everything a father should be. I was so obsessed with success, with perfect grades, that I forgot what really mattered. You, my amazing brave daughter." He paused, struggling to control his voice. "I've spent the past 7 years regretting that day, wishing I could take it back, but too cowardly to try to fix what I broke. And here you are, saving my life after everything I did. I don't deserve your kindness, Manuela, but I'm begging. If I survive this, I'm begging for a chance to try to be the father you always deserved, to support your dreams instead of imposing mine. I know words can't erase years of pain, but if you give me the chance, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to redeem myself, trying to be worthy of the love and compassion you've shown today." Silent tears streamed down her face as she listened. Dario's words were knives, reopening old wounds, but they also brought a long-awaited sense of relief. She wanted to yell, to hug him, to run away. All of these conflicting emotions fought within her. "Dad," she finally said, her voice trembling, I don't know if I can forget, but maybe we can try to start over." He nodded, his gaze filled with gratitude and remorse. "It's more than I deserve, and I promise I won't waste this opportunity." Dr. Cabrera cleared his throat, breaking the silence. Mr. Ibarra, Manuela, I know you have a lot to talk about, but I need to run some tests now that Dario's awake. Manuela stepped back, but Dario reached out and held her hand. Manuela, please don't go, he pleaded, fear in his eyes. I know I don't have the right to ask, but I'll stay, she said gently, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. We're in this together now. As Dr. Cabrera performed the tests, Manuela really looked at her father, truly seeing him for the first time in years. The worry lines on his face, the gray at his temples, they were the marks of time and regret. He didn't take his eyes off of her, as if he was afraid she might disappear if he blinked. When he was done, the doctor smiled, pleased with the results. Things are progressing well, Mr. Ibarra. We still have a long way to go, but I'm optimistic. Dario nodded, but he was still focused on Manuela. Thank you, doctor, for everything. With the doctor gone, father and daughter were alone again, the weight of 7 years of separation hanging in the air. Manuela pulled a chair closer to the bed. They sat in silence, a silence heavy with unspoken words and pent-up emotions. Manuela, Dario said, his voice stronger, I know that asking for your forgiveness is asking too much, but I want you to know, I'm proud of you, proud of the strong and compassionate woman you've become. Despite me, not because of me. Tears welled up in Manuela's eyes. It was hard, Dad. So hard. But little by little, we can try to rebuild our family. I won't accept being mistreated or disrespected. I'm giving you a chance because I believe in change, but I won't tolerate disrespect. I hope one day you will be worthy of my forgiveness. Dario nodded. The weeks following Dario's discharge from the hospital were a delicate period of adjustment. Manuela rented a small apartment near Dario's house, allowing her to be close to assist with his recovery while maintaining an emotional distance she felt she still needed. The initial visits were short and tense, full of awkward silences and superficial conversations. Gradually, though, subtle changes started to occur. Dario, determined to keep his promise, made consistent efforts to connect with Manuela, asking about her work, her interests, and her hopes for the future, things he never cared to know before. Manuela, in turn, found herself sharing pieces of her life, cautiously testing the waters of this new dynamic. You know, Dad, Manuela said one day as she helped Dario with his physiotherapy exercises, I think I'm going back to school. I've always wanted to be a social worker. Dario stopped, looking at her with a mixture of surprise and pride. That's wonderful, Manuela. You'll be great at it. Manuela knew this was progress. Her father would never have accepted her becoming a social worker before. Now he was accepting of her choice. Months passed, and the wounds began to heal, slowly. Conversations became easier, the silences less heavy. Dario learned to listen, to truly listen, as Manuela shared her struggles and triumphs of the years they were apart. She began to see beyond the authoritarian figure who dominated her childhood, recognizing the fallible, remorseful man her father had become. One autumn afternoon, almost a year after the transplant, Manuela arrived at Dario's house with exciting news. Dad, I got accepted into the social work program, she exclaimed, her face lit with a radiant smile. Tears welling up, Dario hugged her. I'm so proud of you, daughter. So proud. They were silent for a moment, Manuela's words hanging in the air, a promise of a brighter future. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, a sight they had both seen countless times, but it now seemed filled with new meaning. You know, Manuela finally said, a small smile playing on her lips, I think we've both learned a lot this past year. Dario nodded, returning her smile. Yes, we have. And we'll keep learning. Together. As the stars began to pepper the night sky, father and daughter sat side by side, their silences comfortable now, full of mutual understanding and renewed hope. The road ahead would still be long and sometimes difficult, but they knew they would face the challenges together, strengthened by the love they had rediscovered and by the promise of a new beginning. Night had fallen, enveloping them in its tranquility. Manuela looked at her father, and for the first time in a long time, she felt truly at home. It wasn't a perfect ending, Life rarely offers such tidy conclusions, but it was a new beginning, full of possibilities and the promise of better days. And for now, that was more than enough.